Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inside R&D, coming to you from the home of Wizards of the Coast in Seattle, Washington. I'm your host, Rich Hagan, and together we'll all be howling at the moon, the Eldritch moon. But first, here's a charming little bedtime story.
At the beginning of the Eldritch Moon story, we pick up right where Shadows over Innistrad left off, where a great rumbling sound spread across the plain at the moment of Avacyn's death. And then what is happening is the drown yard off the coast of Nephalia that Jace investigated a while ago. Well, something's coming up from the sea there, and that something, of course, is Emrakul. And Innistrad will never be the same.
We knew going into this that Emrakul was the bad guy. We knew that Nahiri was summoning Emrakul to the plane. That was the cause of the madness. We knew that. But we wanted to slow roll it a little bit. We wanted to create a sense of mystery, right? Shadows of Innistrad was about mystery. We couldn't just tell you that. So what we wanted to do was lay a lot of hints. And then the idea was this was the payoff. Eldritch Moon was, and ta-da, here's what it is. And so we really tried to tease in Shadows of Innistrad, but we knew in Eldritch Moon we had to pay it off.
One thing we really wanted with Emrakul's card was, as this important card, if you open her in limited, you actually might be able to get her on the table.
You get one turn to totally devastate the board, see how much you can kind of drive them mad and use their resources against themselves. But they get one turn to try and recover, and that was just much more fun gameplay than simply casting something that would automatically win the game.
Sorin's response to Emrakul's arrival is perhaps not what you might think. He and Nahiri and Ugin fought the Eldrazi on Zendikar, but here he seems more interested in fighting Nahiri, who brought Emrakul here. So he has actually gone and solicited help from Olivia Valdarin, and all these Valdarin and Markov vampires march on Markov Manor, where Nahiri is waiting.
They have this epic old school planeswalker face-off at Markov Manor, which is twisted and bent and ruined, as we saw in Shadows over Innistrad. And the two are fighting in ways that you can't, it's mind-blowing, because these guys, they're thousands of years old and they have all this power. And in the end, Nahiri does get what she wants. She gets Sorin to look straight on, watch Emrakul descend, move her way up the coast, through Nephalia, up into Thraben, and he just sees Innistrad falling. And that's all Nahiri ever wanted. She got her vengeance.
Jace's response to Emrakul appearing on the plane is a little more predictable, I think, what you would expect. He goes and gets help. He goes back to Zendikar and finds the rest of the Gatewatch. Gideon and Chandra and Nissa are still there, still cleaning up. And he brings them back and says, hey, I found the third one.
One of the things that I love about Emrakul as the antagonist in the story is that she's not just a 13/13 who steals your turn. She's bigger than that. She is affecting all of Innistrad with physical warping, with mental warping. So as she moves up the coastline from the drown yard where she emerged to the city of Thraben, where she's drawn because it's the biggest concentration of human life on Innistrad, all of these cultists who've been waiting for arrival and mutated, horrible, half Eldrazi creatures, very different from what we saw on Zendikar, have converged on Thraben as well, where we find the Gatewatch completely overrun.
Enter Liliana Vess. Liliana is the necromancer who has been in touch with Jace for a very long time. They share some history. This Innistrad, she has a manor as well. She's been there doing her own thing. And she's been tangentially aware of the fact that the plane is being invaded by an Eldrazi monstrosity. She also knows that the Gatewatch is there, and they're with Jace. Liliana likes to use things to her advantage, and this situation looks like something that she could leverage. She figures that if she helps the Gatewatch defeat Emrakul, which she believes herself obviously capable of, that they will owe her. And that is something Liliana loves, is to be owed.
Liliana has sort of adopted Innistrad as a second home. This is the first place she came after her spark ignited, and she has spent a lot of time here over the years. So she's strangely fond of the place and interested in saving it from being overrun by the Eldrazi.
So Liliana is a very important character in the story. She has her necromantic powers as strong as they'll ever be here on the plane of Innistrad. So we tried to deliver on that with pushing her mana cost down as much as we could, and to give her a sweet ultimate, very reminiscent of Endless Ranks of the Dead.
With this Liliana, we knew that we wanted a pretty low-cost planeswalker, as coming into this standard environment, there's a pretty large density of 4 and 5 cost planeswalkers, and we didn't really want to push Liliana up to 6. So we wanted something probably at 3 mana, and we were looking for effects that would be interesting on a 3 mana planeswalker. The challenge with 3 mana planeswalkers is always that when they come down very early, if they are especially difficult to answer, they can just take over the game immediately. So we were looking for something a little bit more directional and something that pointed you towards some of the themes of the set.
Pivotal event number 4, Dark Salvation, is this awesome moment where the Gatewatch are in tremendous trouble. They're being totally overrun by all of these monsters and cultists, and who should arrive but Liliana? And hooray, she brought zombies.
With the Gatewatch overrun, their deliverance comes from an unexpected quarter. Liliana shows up at the head of an army of zombies, and she is strolling in triumphantly as Innistrād's last hope. Not exactly the white knight on a shining horse that you would expect to see showing up to save the day. In her mind, she's the star of this movie, and she swoops in fully aware of the fact that she's the star of this movie, practically looking at the camera saying, "Look at me, I'm awesome."
So we knew from the very beginning that Liliana and her zombies were going to play a role in saving the day, that they are immune to the physically warping effects of Emrakul. They have no minds to warp, so they can't be won over to her side either. Zombies are the perfect tool against the Eldrazi. On the design team, we really wanted to make sure that that was true in the gameplay as well, which is how the Eldrazi horror tokens ended up as 3/2s. They hit a little harder than zombies, but if you've got a bunch of 3/2s and a bunch of 2/2s stacked up, the person with the 2/2s is pretty happy to trade all those 2/2s for 3/2s.
Innistrad being different from Zendikar, the Gatewatch is not able to recreate the magical techniques that they used to destroy Ulamog and Kozilek on Zendikar. What they end up doing is living by Avacyn's motto, actually. What cannot be destroyed must be bound. So, turns out the Hell Vault, in which Avacyn herself was imprisoned, along with all the demons she stuck there over the years, is a fragment of the moon. Which means, in a strange roundabout way, that the moon is like a giant Hell Vault. So that's where they stick Emrakul.
This is just the end of the story. All we have to do is, they use Tamiyo's magic to imprison Emrakul in the moon. Could you just do that? Could you just make a card that represents being imprisoned in the moon? So it was tricky. We kind of knew it needed to be blue because it was Tamiyo's magic, and so we spent a lot of time, and we definitely sort of this is a tricky card. It's a weird card. It does something that we don't normally do, but we spent a lot of time and energy trying to find the exact, what exactly does it mean to be trapped in the moon?
The challenge with Tamiyo was that she moved from being a mono blue planeswalker in her first incarnation to a Bant planeswalker. So she was both much more difficult to cast and really hard to kind of relate about, well, what's the natural evolution of her? And we tried a lot of versions of her that parroted, I think, a little too much, exactly what her first card did. And while we ended up in somewhat similar space, we kind of, flipped some things, reversed them, got up with the idea of okay, well, what if her minus ability freezes some creatures? Then her plus ability says, well, we'll give them creatures curiosity. She's a pretty curious person. And this idea of they'll work together, but this card is going to require something out of you. It really requires you to play a creature deck.
One of my favorite things about the new Tamiyo that's in Eldritch Moon is the ultimate, which lets you draw 3 cards, and then you can cast spells without paying their mana cost. So all that's cool, but what I really like is that if you combine this Tamiyo's ultimate with the original Tamiyo's ultimate, which whenever you cast a spell, it goes, instead of going to your graveyard, it just goes back to your hand. Put those two together and you can just cast all of your spells as many times as you want for free, infinite mana, returning them to your hand, and you can just chain everything off and go crazy.
Probably the biggest challenge of making Eldritch Moon is there's a lot going on. We were back in Innistrad, and we had Shadows of Innistrad had to deliver everything you loved about Innistrad, plus new things. So we had all that. We were the small steps. We had to continue what was going on. We had to continue the story, plus huge reveals. Emrakul is here. Liliana joins the Gatewatch. I mean, there's a lot going on. And we had new mechanics, and we had old mechanics, and there's all these facets we had to fit in. We had this little tight set we had to fit so many things into, and that was the challenge of how do you get all this awesomeness into this little tiny set. And we did it, and you guys all get to play it, because that is Eldritch Moon.